happened when a new pope was finally named from the conclave? How did traffic look on Wikipedia that day?
The most visited day of human traffic was the day that the new pope was announced.
Maryana Iskander, it's absolutely wonderful to have you with us on Power Chat. Thank you for taking time out of a very, very busy schedule to be with us. So I want to start with a big number. I was reading that 1.5 billion devices visit Wikipedia every month. I know I'm right in there, but could you share with me, what does that mean in the world?
Well, Ferial, the even bigger number is that 16 billion visits to Wikipedia every month. I often think of that as the population of the entire Earth times 2 every month coming from those devices. It is true that Wikipedia is a top 10 website, in some countries the top most visited website, alongside the social media platforms that, as you may know, are operated by large tech companies, and we are a nonprofit organization doing something very different.
Absolutely. So it also says a lot about trust in this nearly 25-year-old online encyclopedia that is run and operated as a non-profit. How do you maintain those trust levels when I'm sure that they come under attack quite often?
Well, as you know, Ferial, I think trust in institutions is eroding across societies everywhere in the world. When Wikipedia first started, it was mocked as an idea that would never work. And 25 years later, as you know, one of the most trusted places on the internet for information. I think transparency is a big part of that. Everything that happens on Wikipedia is visible for the public to see. And I think that that engenders a level of trust as we increasingly are fed information on the internet that we don't know where it come from. We don't know who created it. We don't know how to fact check it. And so I think that idea of transparency has led to a huge amount of ongoing trust. And also, if you understand some of what I describe as behind the screen, if you think about Wikipedia's policies and rules and guidelines, they have stood the test of time. Reliable sources, citations, making sure that you can defend and explain where your information comes from. So I think that the idea of putting transparency alongside enduring rules and policies has led to a trust that I really do feel optimistic is going to carry us well into the future.
So, I mean, it's pretty clear to me that this information disorder, which has been threatened and being seen as a risk, we are now living right in it. We are firmly in the era of disinformation. I feel like we've moved from misinformation, deep fakes. If you look at the Sahel region, it's very, very common across it, as I think you see perhaps Russian influence mechanisms start to show themselves there. And this has extreme consequences for democracy and also for social justice. And in this context, Wikipedia does, to me, feel like an outlier, something that was a little before its time. And so what does it still offer the world and those of us who care about information integrity? It's much older, but how can we learn from those mechanisms of transparency, verifying information, and mostly democratizing how information is created and then disseminated?
I mean, one of the reasons I find this work so inspiring, and I'm grateful for opportunities like this to talk about it, Ferial, is because this is an outlier, and it's an opportunity to show societies, to show regulators, lawmakers, other companies that there can be a different way, that we can have information that's much more open, that we can trace back the provenance of where information comes from, that we can attribute it properly to those who create it. And I think particularly in a lot of the conversations around generative AI, we have tried to use our voice as Wikipedia to say all these things people claim can't be done can be done because we do them. You can have your AI models be open and transparent. You can allow communities who use those models to understand what their impacts are on even different subsegments of their population if they want to understand and change those models. There is a way, I think, for Wikipedia to not just be a quirky project that nobody thought would work, but instead a standard bearer of what is possible for the integrity of information. I think 25 years of work globally has also strengthened Wikipedia. I mean, some of what you've described, in my view, has been around for a long time. It's just maybe felt more accelerated in some parts of the world more recently. But just having, 2.5 decades of practice with how to deal with some of these headwinds that we are seeing in some societies across the world, I think, again, provides a chance for others to learn from and take lessons and maybe even contribute and be part of this mission as a way of not just looking at the challenges of the world, but actually doing something about it. We invite anybody can contribute to Wikipedia. I'd love to explain how easy that is if you follow the rules, but they're pretty clear what they are. And so that those who might feel despondent or despairing of what they're experiencing in the online world have a place that they're welcome to come and not just read, but also contribute.
So it's a philosophy which, when it was started and for quite a while, was felt by a commercial and profit-seeking world to be an idea of the fringe. And in fact, if you look at the numbers, it's a mainstreamed idea. But now we're rapidly moving quite quickly from the internet age to the AI or augmented intelligence age. And because I want to talk about that, I wanted to test something. So I put a search in and I said, what is Wikipedia? So Gemini obviously gave me the first answer because I think that's where we're getting to. And I had to scroll down to find the Wikipedia link. So how do you think about this AI age at Wikipedia? And then what kinds of partnerships are you entering into with these emerging giants? How are you structuring that relationship so you maintain this new mainstream?
As all of us who are of the generation that still uses search on the internet will come to the fact that young people nowadays are using what we would describe as a chat-based internet and not a link-based internet. And it definitely has ramifications for Wikipedia, but counterintuitively not maybe the ones that you would think. So when ChatGPT first launched, as is the case with many technology innovations, the headlines were like the death of Wikipedia, definitely imminent. And in fact, not at all true. We have not seen a reduction in our traffic since ChatGPT launched. And what we now know is that all of these large language models, commercial ones, often have Wikipedia as the single largest or one of the largest sources of training data. And that, is consistent with our mission, the idea of making knowledge freely accessible to be used and reused. But I think with some principles attached to it, as I said, attribution, understanding where information comes from, keeping it as open as possible. We have long been in what I would describe as a symbiotic relationship with a lot of these large tech companies, and certainly Google is one of them. I think the wrong answer, Ferial, is to stay stuck in the past and expecting that, if I think about my nephews who often start their searches on the internet through YouTube as an example, it's our job to also ensure that encyclopedic content and an ability to creatively access Wikipedia exists on these other platforms. And we've got an incredible team of super smart people that are thinking about how to also bring Wikipedia to where people are on the internet, as well as ensuring that this corpus of knowledge is one that the large tech companies not only benefit from, but contribute to. We often say that our content is free, but our infrastructure is not free. And so we have, in fact, set up successful partnerships with what we would call the large reusers of our content to ensure that they pay their fair share as well.
How did you negotiate those agreements? And are you at liberty to say who they've been with thus far? Because I guess all of us who are in the world of trying to put good information into our countries, the universe, as we want to protect good societies. Would love to hear about how you managed to do that. Is it your heft that gave you the space, or was it just building relationships and making it happen?
Well, as we may talk about later, I am the steward of a lot of foresight of people who preceded me at the Wikimedia Foundation and really understood the need to think creatively and differently about how we support this very precious knowledge resource. I think the logic at the time, and what continues to be true, is that our content is free. It is available on a free license, and so people don't pay for the content. That said, the infrastructure that we provide, our servers, the way that people may scrape or download or use our data varies widely. You can imagine making Wikipedia available for an individual to download is a very different story than one of my best examples is, when a celebrity dies or a new pope is named, the amount of traffic that we see is extraordinary because typically other sources and other news sources are relying on Wikipedia. And I think that this has been a set of conversations about access to the infrastructure more so than the content.
Oh, and how has it gone? I mean, have you struck those
Yeah.
partnerships already?
Yeah. So some of them I'm not at liberty to say, but in many cases, what I feel confident about is that more and more people, both in the tech space, but I would say actually in the broader media and business world, recognize that even though Wikipedia is a highly efficient resource and operates on a shoestring compared to obviously many of these other social media platforms, there is a need for everybody to, in some sense, pay their fair share and contribute for the access that they have. So we have a team that I would describe as generating creative solutions that maintain our nonprofit mission, but can coexist in a world in which we have to generate revenue to support our work.
I'm going to have to look for that team on Wikipedia because they sound like something all of us should have. I want to segue to just ask you, so what happened when a new pope was finally named from the conclave? How did traffic look on Wikipedia that day?
So that was our single highest day of visits. It broke the record from when Queen Elizabeth II passed, which was I often say that on days when either celebrities die or big world events happen is when I am the most focused on our engineering teams, because we saw, I think it was 7 times the traffic that we've seen from the prior largest event. And one of our engineers made a really lovely graph in which he showed, traffic that was really pretty constant. Yeah. And then the white smoke is what he described. And then the white smoke went straight into incredible pinnacle. So the most visited day of human traffic was the day that the new pope was announced.
So the death of Wikipedia, not so much.
Not so much. I mean, I will say that we're experiencing, as you've commented, lots of change in the world, but I feel heartened by the repeated calls of the death of Wikipedia and the opposite being true, that this becomes more reliable, more valuable, more needed, more recognized as time goes by.
So last year you invited me to the wiki in Durban and Joburg, and I have to tell you, I really loved it. And so I was thinking a little bit ahead of our interview, why did I feel so at home there, where I don't usually feel at home in the worlds of big tech, and yet I did there. And I realized it's because it felt like a newsroom. There were lots of maverick characters, there were pedantic editors, and mostly there were people who were curious about good information as a bedrock of knowledge formation. And for me, that's the heartbeat of what makes a good society. So I recognize the familiarities, and because our worlds are different but similar, I was wondering how you see the future of journalism, because obviously, we struggle with the same, sometimes existential issues and sometimes quite exciting ones as you look into the future.
Well, I will tell you that our African volunteers who gather every year at this event called Wiki Indaba, we're delighted to have you as a speaker and a participant. And what you felt, I think, speaks to the kind of interconnected tissue of these kinds of institutions across society. Librarians, journalists, Wikipedians, people who in their own ways are focused, as you said, on information integrity, sharing it, sharing a love of learning, a curiosity. And I acknowledge that Wikipedia can only exist with a healthy information ecosystem that includes healthy journalism. And many of the challenges facing your industry, obviously you know more than me, but they feel similar in the sense of needing to understand what is the long view that requires change? How do you maintain integrity in the short term? One thing I would draw your attention to is that we recently had quite a significant victory in the Indian Supreme Court, and it related to a case around a Wikipedia article covering judicial proceedings. And the lower court had asked us to take down the article, which is a high bar for us. And so we appealed it to the Supreme Court. And one of the outcomes of that ruling was a recognition that the media's interest in covering judicial proceedings is critical. And so you wouldn't think that was something from Wikipedia, but what I feel incredibly proud of was the number of media organizations in India who recognized that this case had given them expanded rights and expanded freedom in covering judicial proceedings. And it had come from, in many ways, a very adjacent, but I would say similarly motivated and similarly a set of values or organization. So there may be places where these connections don't look so obvious, but that the shared interests are definitely there.
I'll go and read up on that Indian case. Does it require to protect like these ecosystems of partnership, of good information integrity? Does it always require places where democracy is solid? Like India may be subject to certain travails, which we read about, but its institutions still hold the line. Is that important for Wikipedia and for journalism to succeed?
Well, we may need to have a longer conversation, Ferial. If you look at the 5 pillars of Wikipedia, so these are like the founding principles, one of the pillars, which I think I'll quote mostly correctly, says that Wikipedia is neither democracy nor anarchy. It's not a soapbox. It is not a public square. It's an encyclopedia. And the recognition that encyclopedic knowledge I would describe as a bedrock and foundational for a lot of these other things. But the fact that Wikipedia thrives in societies all across the world, I mean, our multilingualism, as you may know, we have 332 languages. This is just, it's the most multilingual project on the internet. And that says to me that there's something about this core tenet and these core foundations of knowledge that, in my view, find a home everywhere where people have curiosity and they have it as individuals, that the institutions of our society are important, but actually if we have a fundamental belief in humans, their individual capacity for knowledge and curiosity and learning, and that can be given access, which is the gift of the internet and the gift of technology, that it actually, for me, points an optimistic kind of direction for what may be possible even in parts of the world that we describe as difficult or having institutions that may seem anti-democratic.
So also there, it was very good for me to see under the hood because I didn't really understand Wikipedia so much before. The volunteers, the editors, the people who keep it running. And as I think I've heard you say, or a version of it at least, is that it's a system or a network and it's not a hierarchy. And so how does the foundation enable all of this to happen?
Yeah. Wikipedia is often described as a leaderless organization. It's a book that I often reference called The Spider and the Starfish, in which this idea of how you build a decentralized and empowered organizations, of which Wikipedia, in my view, is a living testament. Having said that, there are functions that have to get housed and done somewhere. And in our case, the foundation really serves three primary purposes. The most important is the platform host. And so the technology infrastructure, the servers, the ability to support product development is critical. And our teams are mostly comprised of engineers and product folks. The second, as I referenced, this incredible legal victory in India is actually a legal and regulatory team. We are operating in jurisdictions all over the world. We provide support to volunteers. We protect and defend the projects. We ensure that they can grow and expand. And the third, which you experienced at your time at Wiki Indaba, is really the nurturing and the care and feeding of the human beings who are the kind of beginning, middle, and end of Wikipedia's magic, is connecting volunteers, providing support for the activities that they may undertake in their local communities, building these partnerships, ensuring that there's kind of a knitting, a kind of interstitial connection that exists across all of these incredibly varied and diverse communities all over the world.
And how exactly does the foundation do that? Is it with funds? Is it by building community? Is it by creating regular opportunities for them to connect across regions? And how do you make them feel as if they are co-owners? Because I genuinely got the sense when I chatted to not many people, it has to be said, that they felt like they co-owned this product.
Well, they are co-owners. I mean, in many respects, the foundation, in my view, is here to enable and to serve and to connect. And so to your question, we do all of the above. In some cases, it's really enabling people. It could be with resources, it could be with connections, it could be with technology. And a lot of that is really, you know me well, is listening deeply to what it is people are needing, or listening deeply to what problem needs to be solved, and then empowering and enabling people to guide us, lead us in the directions that are going to be most effective for their own communities. And we see that diversity everywhere. As you may know, we're going to be gathering our global volunteers in Nairobi in Kenya. This will be what we call Wikimania, the big annual conference of Wikipedians and Wikimedia volunteers. We met in Cape Town in about 2018. And so it is a signal for me of the diversity of this community, that we are back in a different region of the African continent, and a chance for, again, these local communities. We've had incredible growth in East Africa, to help our global volunteer base learn about their local context, as well as a place where humans connect with other humans in person and build these kinds of relationships that can then mature online.
One of the things that saddens me about this moment in our world is that the term DEI has become pejorative. And yet these are three beautiful words: diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what I would like to chat about is how Wikipedia and the foundation have moved very intentionally to close the gender gap. So what was the problem? Because when I read some of the statistics, there clearly was a problem that women's voices, women's stories, women editors, they were just in the shortest supply. How have you worked to close that gap?
Well, my earlier reflection of Wikipedia serving as an encyclopedic resource that relies on secondary sources and reliable and verified sources is sometimes sort of a signal or a canary that the broader information ecosystem also has some work to do. And if you look at the coverage of women's biographies across the board, we need more primary sources for more of that to happen on Wikipedia. But having said that, our volunteers have come together, I think, to do quite remarkable things, as you said, to close the gender gap. We have many what we call sort of subject matter groups that come together with a certain passion around particular types of women's biographies. There's an American volunteer named Rosie Stevenson Goodnight, who is incredibly passionate about writing the biographies of women American writers. There is a shero of note named Jess Wade, who's a doctor in the UK who highlights and writes on Wikipedia the biographies of women scientists. And as a consequence of all of those efforts adding up, we have made a significant leap forward in at least beginning to close more of the gap around women's biographies. If I give a small example, Ferial, getting newspapers to write more obituaries about women is an important primary source. And if you look at studies of how newspapers even cover who's worthy enough to be reported on at the point of death, that is an example of where Wikipedia relies on this broader system to ensure that more and more women's representation is preserved digitally and for time immemorial.
What I've in fact begun noticing is that as our newsrooms get smaller, that ability to tell the story of a life lived and then a death of a whole life lived has become constrained. And so I think recently of two huge deaths of African women, Eva Joyce Wynne and Koyo Koyo, who was the first, or going to be the first African woman, the first woman to curate the Venice Biennale. I found it difficult to find full obituaries to them, which makes me completely understand what you're speaking about, but there's clearly lots of work to do. So you live in Johannesburg, and how did that happen, and what draws you to the city, or what drew you to it, and what keeps you here?
Well, you know this well. I find the energy and the aliveness of Johannesburg like very contagious. In my prior life, working with young people who are the heartbeat and the future and the magic of all societies, but particularly African societies, you can feel that in Joburg. There's a sense of opportunity, there's a sense of possibility. I think in some cities, one can feel stuck. I'm born into a particular place or a class or a group or a geography, and it's very hard to move around. And my experience of Johannesburg is that it's one of those cities that you can make what you want of it. It's as you know, complex city. It has challenges, as many places do, but I just think this sense of aliveness is what keeps me there and makes me, as you know, an ambassador for this incredible place and this incredible country.
Absolutely. Like tomorrow, I'm going off to the Latitudes Art Fair, and there isn't a day and night, and sometimes a few times in a day and a night, where you can't go out and do something marvelously creative. So that spirit is certainly here.
Totally.
So Wikipedia, no, the foundation, the Wikimedia Foundation, takes its Wikimania to Nairobi, another such an exciting African city, in August. Why is this important, and why is it big?
I think it, again, signals the diversity of opportunity to showcase local work. As I said, our East African communities have been growing and doing incredible work. One thing that I might highlight here is the MacArthur Foundation, which is known for their Genius Awards. That's one of the programs that they run, have developed this quite competitive prize called 100 and Change. It's a single $100 million prize that goes to an organization and, more importantly, a project that has the potential to really fix or change or have impact at the level of the society. And out of 900 plus applications, the Wikimedia Foundation this year is one of the 5 finalists, and the project that we are competing
That's
with.
Huge.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it is huge. But the project is called Abstract Wikipedia, which I like to describe simply as the most incredible idea of taking natural language, turning it into math, so that it can be turned into another language. And the reason that's so important and valuable is that we see that smaller languages that have smaller communities cannot put their content on Wikipedia at the same scale as large languages with large communities. And so trying to develop these like wildly exciting, incredible technology solutions that empower local languages and local communities to have that capability. And so for me, showcasing the work of Abstract Wikipedia in a year that we're back on the African continent, where there, as you know, are so many languages that ought to have a place online to be written and understood and discussed. And one of the most incredible quotes that came from a volunteer who works on this project is that I think she said, sometimes my language is good enough for the kitchen table, it's good enough for a family conversation, but it's not used for knowledge and for learning and for writing. And so I think if Abstract Wikipedia has an opportunity to help solve that, it's just an incredible year to showcase that while we are back on the African continent.
That is excellent. I mean, I read a lot from Prof. Vukosi Marivate, who's,
Yes.
for me, a leading thinker in, if you enter the AI age and you don't think about what those large language models are being built on, you consign people to the margins again. So that can be quite revolutionary to ensure that these languages all take their place at this new table that's being laid. I look forward to reading more on that.
Beautifully said. You
also announced last week that the search begins now for the new CEO of the Wikimedia Foundation. What happens from now? I see it's quite a long search. You only leave in January 2026.
Yeah. I feel incredibly proud of our board and our executive team and our organization. We have undertaken a deliberate, thoughtful, careful transition that has been underway for well over a year. I think the feedback, even post the announcement, has been recognition internally and externally that the Wikimedia Foundation is in great shape, that our volunteer communities are resilient and thriving and ready for the challenges that lie ahead. And so I will be supporting the process as the board searches for what we will welcome as the 5th chief executive of the Wikimedia Foundation. It coincides beautifully with the 25th anniversary of Wikipedia, which is in January of 2026. And I think a note of celebration and welcome for a leader that will continue to take this organization and this mission to new heights. I have been very transparent that the set of things that I came to do have been completed successfully. And as you know, my view is we often have a leadership crisis in the world because people don't know how to leave well. And so it's important to come and to do a good job and make space for the next person and be able to watch institutions evolve and grow and continue with different forms of leadership from strength to strength.
Absolutely. I mean, Nelson Mandela is the great teacher of how to leave well, and you've certainly had a good time. So my final question to you is, as I think about the things that I know you've done, and I know there's a lot more, but Planned Parenthood, then starting Harambee, which is our biggest shot at cracking this hard challenge of youth unemployment, and then the Wikipedia Foundation. What is the golden thread that runs through all these roles you've chosen for your life?
It's a beautiful question, Ferial. I think that I'm deeply curious about how we can design and, in many cases, rewire these big systems so that individual people can be liberated and given dignity and given freedom to make choices for themselves, what information they want to consume, what kind of work they want to do, what kind of choices they want to make even with their own healthcare. And I think it's this idea that we have to have systems and big platforms and institutions in our society that are truly designed around humans and designed around people, and that enable and empower and liberate and just give people dignity. And I think that is an incredibly exciting set of problems. I mean, I feel like I'm going to be working for a long time because there's a lot of systems that I think need that kind of rewiring and need that kind of a rethink. And so it's been for me just a privilege and an honor to be able to think about and contribute to those kinds of solutions in so many different domains and so many different fields all over the world.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on a role well run. Are there any final parting shots you'd like to share with us?
Listen, I would just say thank you for your interest in this remarkable human community that is the most breathtaking, mess of humans doing something together that is life-changing and I think is going to endure far into the future. We hope we can invite you to more Wikimedia events, whether they're in South Africa or elsewhere. And I just love talking to you. So I thank you for the time today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay.